About 30-some years ago, 36 years ago or 7 years ago, a man named Stuart Alsop,
Yes.
columnist for Newsweek,
Right.
had leukemia, the AML, acute difficult leukemia, and wrote about it. I don't know. Have you gone back and looked at any of his columns?
No, I've not. No.
And he told the story. He was at NIH, and I think he might have had bone marrow transplant. I can't remember for sure, but I remember I was glued to it, and he took us all the way through his process. How much more are we going to hear from you about your situation?
I hope a lot. I mean, I don't say that just for my own sake. But
And what kind of things are you thinking about telling us about?
well, I think the main thing is to emphasize the extraordinary innovations in this kind of branch of medicine that are becoming available based on our new knowledge of our genetic makeup. And so insofar as these treatments are applicable to me, which some of them are, I'm hoping to write in some detail and alert people to possibilities that they may not yet know about that exist, even for quite hard cases, quite advanced cases.
Any thought of writing a book? I mean, you mentioned earlier.
Yes, I thought I'd write a book that was both about facing death and about the struggle for life, and how one motivation for the latter, in my case, apart from the obvious ones, is precisely to see if I can participate in pushing those boundaries back and enlarging the area of scientific knowledge.
Have you lost interest in certain things in the world?
No.
Not at all?
No, not in the least.
And as you sit here today, what would be your number one interest of things going on in the world?
Right now?
Right now.
Well, looking at today's paper, which is the first thing I do every day still, I suppose it would have to be one version or another of the confrontation with Islamic Jihad. In particular, the appallingly serious news in Pakistan in the last few weeks, where the whole threat seems to me to have been amped up noticeably and in a way we haven't quite internalized, where the chief minister of the country's most important state, Mr. Salman Taseer, is murdered in cold blood by someone pretending to be his bodyguard on the grounds that he opposes an existing blasphemy law, not even that he's committed blasphemy. And so that anyone claiming to be a Muslim is entitled to kill him, and that this got the endorsement of all the religious authorities, all the mullahs and imams in Pakistan. So it used to be bad enough on conviction by a court of the charge of blasphemy, you could face a death sentence, but you'd have been through a jury and appeals process, the rest of it. Bad enough in all conscience, but warranted by the Quran, if you care, which I don't. But now, permission to anybody to appoint himself an executioner on the spot and be the agent of the religion in murdering anyone they like. This is fantastically dangerous. And we've decided to invest ourselves completely in the idea that there are moderates to be found, if we can pay them, who will fend this off. I don't think there's a prayer of that, to coin a phrase, especially if we appear to be their patrons.
How do you, I mean...
I think we're totally fooling ourselves about it.
What about this process of having to face this illness?
Yes.
Are you surprised about? And the reason I ask you about, I mean, you went off on some substance there, and some people just give all that up when they are faced with this kind of situation. I mean, what's changed? What about this process surprised you?
My internal process.
Your process of becoming ill, and they tell you you've got stage 4 esophageal cancer and all that. I mean, are you surprised about any of this the last 6 months? Because you've obviously thought about it. You wrote 7 pages about death.
No. Yes. Well, I think a memoir of a person who just passed 60 has to face that. So I thought I owed that much to the readers. No, it hasn't been all that surprising, actually, no. It's a commonplace thing. I mean, I wrote this somewhere. I mean, I don't sit around asking myself, why me? And if I did, the cosmos wouldn't bother to favor me with a reply. I wouldn't even say, why not? It's a commonplace thing. For someone of my age and previous habits, it's almost laughably predictable. The only interesting thing about it is its possible amenability to treatments that were unknown until very recently. The outcome of brilliant work by devoted people, some of whom I'm very lucky to count as friends.
You know, there are many examples we hear from friends and people we've known over the years where a doctor will say some very straightforward and crude things and make life very uncomfortable. I remember there was a reporter in this town, worked at the Washington Post, who told me one day, he's no longer with us, the doctor called him after he'd had tests and he said, guess what? You got the big C. And you mean, I couldn't believe that he actually, you know, that happened. But the reason I bring this up is
that is a bit crass.
What marks would you give the medical profession and the way they've treated you, and did they give you hope that this thing can be licked?
They've given me more than a margin of hope it can be licked, yes, and they haven't pronounced on my chances unless I've asked them, which I decided not to do at first, until it occurred to me that it would be very useful for, if you like, accounting purposes, to have a rough idea, because one has to plan for one's loved ones and descendants. I thought, so for actuarial reasons, I'd like to have a guess. They don't like being asked because they don't really know. And the best answer I got was the following. If you took 1,000 people who were myself, in other words, my age, my state of health, my gender, I think, 1,000 of us today, half of us would be dead in a year. Of the remaining half, others might hope to live more than a year, and of that number, quite a number, to live for a considerable number of years. They can't do better than that. That was from a very senior person at the NIH who was expecting the question.